Are you frustrated with your SaaS vendor? Well, you're not alone. My team and I do hundreds of deals every year. And here are the top things that I wish they could do better. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. For the last 20 years, I've drafted and negotiated a variety of technology-related contracts and litigated failed technology projects in courts across the country. So the first issue that I've got with most SaaS vendors is that they really push the sizzle without any associated stake. And what I mean by that is, they're trying to push the next big thing, the next big shiny object. And I think today that most likely is going to be artificial intelligence. And I think while there's certainly value in AI and it's a transformative technology, make no mistake about that, I think what SaaS vendors could do better is really focus on the things that you need as a customer, getting the most value out of the system that you already have, utilizing the software in a way that makes sense for you, minimizing the likelihood that you've got shelfware, being able to trade out products, unused products for products that you think you're going to utilize. Those are the things that I think they could really help you with as a customer. And instead, I think what they are really trying to focus on is getting you excited about the things that are coming up in that product roadmap, pushing, again, these big, shiny objects. And while I think, certainly, those are attractive, it really should be more of a focus on helping you get the most value out of the software you have today instead of trying to upsell you on future products. The next thing I think they could do better with is this concept of universal price increases across their customer base. And I think if you are struggling with seeing the value in the system that you already have, you're underutilizing it, you're not making the most out of the technology, the functionality, the software product, that's a problem in general. But then when you're asked to pay more for the same thing that you have and you're not even getting 100% value out of it, it's really hard to stomach. And these price increases can be anywhere from 10%, 25%, 40%. I mean, they can shock the conscious. And I think if that is the situation that you find yourself in, certainly you've got to push back and you've got to really say, where is the value associated with this? And here are all the issues that I've got. And so certainly I think that's one thing that SaaS vendors can do better. It's really, make the value congruent with what you're utilizing the software for. If there's going to be a 40% increase in my utilization of the software product, well, give me something for that price increase. Make sure that I'm getting value out of the software that I have. One of the other issues with SaaS vendors is really unexpected cost. And in the contracts that we negotiate, that's a huge issue. We want to minimize the likelihood that there are going to be unknowns, especially on the financial side. We want to make sure that the cost outlay over the term of that agreement is laid out with particularity, that everybody understands what the costs are going to be. Inevitably, though, there's going to be something unexpected. There's going to be a cost that was not anticipated, that you didn't understand how it was calculated, or there's going to be some sort of discount that you're not able to take advantage of that you thought you would be. There's going to be a reconfiguration of product names or SKUs. And so, the price that you negotiated on day one for the product that you thought you had is now called something different with minimally different functionality to account for the change. And now you no longer get a discount for that. That kind of stuff is it's game playing, it's problematic, and it really does lead to customer frustration. In customer fatigue. And I think that's certainly something that SaaS vendors can be better at. Sticking with this issue of unexpected cost, really, as you look at the implementation, I think implementations are incredibly expensive. And one of the frustrations that I've got with vendors, and my clients have with vendors, is that there's a tendency by the salespeople when they're trying to sell you the software to minimize the complexity of the implementation process. They're going to minimize how difficult it's going to be. They're going to tell you that the software can be implemented in a matter of months. They're going to quote you an estimated cost for the implementation that is really nothing more than a wild guess. They lowball it to get you to sign the contract, and now it's 3 times more expensive. Obviously incredibly frustrating for our clients, incredibly frustrating to deal with. And it is one of the things that I see is a reoccurring theme in the lawsuits that we end up getting involved in on behalf of our clients. One of the other issues that we have with SaaS vendors is really poor vendor support. We go to great lengths to put into these contracts SLA obligations, service level commitments, spell out what happens when response times are not what they're supposed to be. And I think that's all a good start. But really, there's nothing more frustrating than a vendor that just doesn't care about you anymore. They're not being responsive to your needs. They send people to your site or to deal with your problems that are not, properly trained. They're incompetent. They're brand new. They're offshore. Whatever it is, I think they can do much better at supporting their customer base. And that leads into one of the things I just talked about is really it's a lack of training. And I think you can look at this in two ways. One is a lack of training of their own consultants, their own personnel. We see that on a regular basis, and that's actually a pretty consistent allegation in the lawsuits that we see, where there was a revolving door of inexperienced and incompetent consultants that didn't understand the software and they didn't understand the client's business. That is a pretty recurrent, pretty common theme in litigation. The other way we see this is really, there's not enough training in the system for the users or the people that are training. The trainers, for example, the super users don't have enough training in the software themselves. And so the training that you're getting and how to utilize that software after go live really is inadequate. Another issue that we will see is really inadequate project management. And this kind of goes hand in hand with incompetent and inexperienced consultants. But from a project management perspective, I think there's a lot of room to grow here. We will see project management that is just fumbled. You'll see project status reports that don't really give you a full picture of what's going on with the implementation. You will see testing that, if not falsified, is rushed through. You'll see gross misrepresentations as to what the status of the project actually is. You'll see project managers that are just not committed to the project. There's a revolving door project management on the vendor side. So all of those things are pretty consistent. And that's certainly a cause of frustration and something I think most vendors can do better with. The last frustration I want to talk about is really with data. And what I mean by that is, I think it's pretty resolved that most vendors are going to concede that you own the data that you put into the system. They're not necessarily looking to have an ownership interest in your data, but what they do want is to control your access to your own data in that software system, and that is problematic. They put a fence around it, and then they want to charge you to get that data out or to have other systems utilize the data, your data, in their system. They argue, well, there's a value add. Maybe, but probably not. I think the issue there is, and you'll see this in lawsuits against SAP, like the Celonis lawsuit, where SAP really wants to charge exorbitant fees if you're going to use sophisticated data analytics and have to go through that SAP system to utilize a third-party data analytics product. That's across the board, whether it's an AI product, you're going to see this pretty consistently. And I think the fact that they're charging you fees to access your own data, I think, is really problematic. And I don't necessarily see that there is much of a value add there. So I think that's certainly a cause for customer frustration and concern. If you have any questions about any of the issues in this video, please feel free to reach out to us at taflaw.com. We'd love to talk to you and get you pointed in the right direction.